Well, the big meeting is taking place there in Yellowknife. I don't know if you've ever been to Yellowknife. Beautiful, beautiful area. You can see the northern lights there. Spectacular, actually. Every Canadian should go to Yellowknife. I think every Canadian that comes to Canada should spend at least a year in Yellowknife. But yeah, so David Eby set to meet with Danielle Smith and other Western leaders in Yellowknife today. Set there to discuss energy security, trade, and Arctic sovereignty. And Smith says she wants a pipeline. And she wants a pipeline to the coast. I wonder how that conversation is going to go. Because Smith is going to say pipeline. And it's like that old SNL skit with Cheeseburger Pepsi. I'm sure Eby's going to say, what about this? And she's going to say pipeline.
Well, it's kind of ironic as well, because Eby's comment, he did the obligatory sort of dig where he's on about, it's very sad that people are talking about separation at this time. Just a kind of pointless thing to say, really.
Yeah.
But the more interesting comment that he made was saying that Western Canada is the economic engine of the country, and pointing out that it's, he said this a few times, hasn't he, in relation to equalization and migration and all kinds of things like that, like where the asylum seekers are distributed and all that kind of thing. But it's just a little bit ironic, really, because BC is the economic engine of nothing, really, is it? BC
well,
has
used
one,
to be. It
one
used
thing.
To be.
Yeah, it used to be. But it has one thing that's relevant, and it's, to be fair, extremely relevant and a massive, massive, powerful possession, and that's the Port of Vancouver, isn't it, really? Other than that,
the coastline
BC
is their thing. Yeah, the ports.
But it's that port in particular, which is kind of why the British took it in the first place, why Mr. Vancouver went there in the first place, because it's got that glorious port protected by Vancouver Island, it doesn't freeze, and it got access to the Pacific and also down the American coast there.
Access to the world, basically, yeah.
Yeah, but other than that, what does BC have other than that? It's got masses of LNG and minerals and all the rest of it, which it's quite difficult to extract. It's got a lot of hydro, but not enough to power the province, because it has to buy from Alberta and the US. What else does BC have? It's not exactly doing well. So when you talk about Western Canada being the economic engine of Canada, I agree, but it's Saskatchewan and Alberta, isn't it? Let's be serious about that.
He could rephrase that and say Alberta and Saskatchewan are the crown jewels of Canada, and I have the key that blocks them from accessing the world. That'd be more.
Yeah, I'll do everything
honest,
I can.
Right?
Just like it's, I think it's safe now. I think he's been gone long enough that we can start to be critical of John Hogan. But where are the comments about John Hogan, who did absolutely everything he could to try and stop everything, really? But he's, particularly the TMX, he was and tankers in southern BC waters, so hostile to that. And David Eby, when is he going to sort of admit that his party and his predecessor were completely wrong to do that, and that they've damaged the Canadian economy and made us even more reliant on the now hated United States?
Yeah, it's BC used to be an economic engine. Our two bigger ones, other than the coastline, which is basically a key for him, a key to for the rest of the provinces that need it. Used to be mining and forestry, but both of those suffering, especially forestry. Forestry in a shambles, really. They've started this, you and I talked about it, they started a committee to look at it, and the committee is full of people that are never going to kind of like figure anything out other than forming another committee, maybe.
How to figure out remuneration for themselves.
Yeah, they'll get that part right, that's for sure. And then in Banff, though, they're hosting the G7 Finance Summit, and Francois-Philippe Champagne will be there.
Well, thank God. Sometimes it's easy to be pessimistic, isn't it? But thank God we've got a heavyweight like Champagne there in charge of that, like a real beefy, giant brain, massive list of successes that he can point to. Say what you want about the Liberals. We've got Champagne.
We'd be better off with a couple of bottles of champagne, I think. But
Yeah. I mean, I'm sorry, Francois Philippe. He doesn't fill me with confidence, as you can probably tell. He
Well,
doesn't even know how to. He doesn't even know how to speak,
yeah,
and
he spent
that's that might sound like a small thing and like a petty thing to criticize somebody for, but I just he never says anything interesting or coherent. That's pretty bad sign, isn't it? In like the number two man in the government.
he spent quite a few minutes there telling Vasi Kapelis that there is no need for a budget, that Canadians just wanted that tax break, and that's, like they're acting in the best interests of Canadians again. Why would you need a budget when, you can just trust us? Like, look at what we've done for the past 10 years. Look at what we've done for the past 10 years. Just have a look. And then...
well, remember that when I still can't get it out of my mind when he announced the Honda investment that's now being paused, whatever that means. But when he announced that, it was like, he was like, the man that has won the raffle. He was so pleased with himself. He was absolutely delighted, and it was going to revolutionize the Canadian economy and all the rest of it. And it was a small amount of money for us to give in subsidy and blah, blah, blah. And just like everything else that he's been responsible for, in a very short period of time, it just disintegrated, turned into nothing. And we're left with the bill.
He is very good at virtue signaling and identity politics, for sure. And I'd say a lot of the Liberals are very good at that. And not so good at humility, and not so good with honesty with the Canadian people.
I mean, to be honest, I would accept almost anything. They can pursue their little religion of hyper-liberalism, whatever you want to call it. They can have that religion. I'm very tolerant of people's religions by and large, and I'll let them have that if they're competent. That's the problem, isn't it? It's the competence crisis that you hear so much about. And that's usually in the context of blue-collar jobs and things like that, where it's like, people have forgotten how to be electricians and all that stuff. I think it's much better to look at our elite when it comes to that question of competence. Because if you're incompetent and you're a religious preacher, who wants that? Who's going to listen to you? And I think that explains the death of Justin Trudeau's political career, because he was both of those things. He was a religious preacher for the religion of, whatever you want to call it, the sort of American college campus leftism or liberalism or whatever it is. Plus, he was incompetent and he couldn't get anything done. He couldn't achieve anything. So that's the problem. I almost feel like, and I'm probably not the only person that thinks this way, hence Mark Carney was just elected on the assumption that he's competent, really. That's the theory, isn't it? And people are willing to forgive him for anything else, any level of, deception or vagueness or anything to do with Brookfield and all the rest of it, as long as he's competent. But, I mean, we hold our breath, don't we, in anticipation. Is he going to be the competent one? Because his finance minister does not fill me with confidence.
So far, nothing points to an accomplishment so far. And this one is disturbing. This is the Unifor president. We'll play this clip here.
Asking the government to consider legislative amendments to include heavier fines imposed on firms that shift production, the ability to seize assets of companies, as well as restricting imports from corporations and companies that offshore Canadian investment and jobs. This may sound heavy-handed. That's because it is. And that's because this is the fight of our lives. We must take a stand now, as the bleed has already begun. Fair trade is a two-way street, and companies that operate in Canada cannot for a second believe they can act with impunity for following orders issued by the President of the United States. If they act against the economic interests of this country, they must also face punishment. Along with my letter to the Prime Minister and his cabinet, we've shared a comprehensive legal opinion that outlines various options. We look forward to further discussions with the federal government on this matter. I want to thank you very much for joining, and now I'm available for any questions.
Well, I'm sure that strikes just a ton of confidence in anybody that wants to invest in Canada right now.
I was just thinking, like, did that thought even enter her mind before she uttered those words?
I mean,
It
if
seems
you're,
that the answer is no. I mean, apparently it didn't even enter her mind, which is
if,
just remarkable, isn't it?
that is the beginning of a death spiral. If you're saying that, and now you're sitting there with investment capital, and you have a choice to invest it in Canada or the United States, here's one country that is a union is proposing legislation that will seize your assets if you have
knowing what I know now.
if you have to make a business decision. Would you invest in Canada? Would you?
Yeah, I don't. I mean, whereas the Americans also are trying to figure out ways to punish people that leave, but as usual, you have to mention it's a different beast altogether, isn't it? Canada is optional for every company on in the planet, or in the world rather, whereas the US isn't. The US is essential. So
this is
they can do that kind of thing. We can't.
If the government wants to do it, if the Canadian government wants to do it, they should start with Brookfield and show it as an example. Lead by example. Seize all the assets of Brookfield. Just ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And that is what is going to force more investment out of Canada. Because here's a couple of choices that Canadian companies have. If they think this is going to be real, they leave right away before the legislation comes into play. Two, the most important one is, why would you invest in Canada if this is even proposed legislation? Look at all the headwinds that right now for companies that are thinking about investing in Canada. It's not a pretty picture. High taxation, tons of regulation, really hard to get anything done in a time frame that is like 20 years to get a mine site permitted in Canada. 20 years. Like who wants to embark
and just
on that?
the never-ending bottomless pit of hostility that certain groups within Canada have towards any kind of development whatsoever, including NIMBYs, basically the entire province of Quebec, a lot of urban British Columbia, many First Nations,
David Eby,
lots of activist environment groups that call themselves environmentalists, just like activist left-wing groups, and then lots of lawyers who just are along for the ride because they get a lot of money to go to court with activists and First Nations and all the rest of it. It's like a coalition of the anti-builders, and yeah.
So here's some more good news.
The legal arrangement as well favors them, doesn't it, rather than central authority. So I mean, everything's basically on their side.
So here's some more bad news for Canada. A TD chief economist says that Canada will likely enter a recession and will bleed 100,000 jobs.
Nice.
Next slide there. There you go. Yeah. So, and then the budget. The Parliament. It's summer holidays. You know, because they work 3 weeks.
Well, she just said that, Mrs. Unifor there just said, like, this is the greatest challenge of our lives. We've heard that a lot of times, haven't we? But apparently it's not that big of a challenge because we can still go on our vacations, can't we? We can still relax. They've had, before you get cheeky about them, remember that the politicians, they've had a lot of worrying to do, and they've had to campaign. They've had to wonder if they're going to keep their seats and their delicious pensions and massive salaries. It's been very stressful. I think they need to go have some time on the beach.
We're going to talk about it later, but it looks like the Canadian Pension Fund is investing in the United States too. We'll talk about that later too. So maybe we'll seize those assets. That comment from her is actually dangerous to investment in Canada. Like I'm telling you, there's so many places in this global economy where you can invest. And if you hear those words, where Canada's become more and more socialist, and that is next to like a Russia thing, like we're going to seize assets and stuff like that. That's just ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. This is a Hollydone Blacklock story. Canada Post in real trouble. And they cite a 1985 no layoff promise. So now they're being held to that Canada Post management agreed at that point to an ironclad job security plan 40 years ago that finds that commitment now untenable. So there you go. So they've got themselves in a really tough spot. So, like they're like $1 billion losses. Yeah, so I don't like, what is the path forward for Canada Post?
It almost feels like it's like they're playing chicken. The workers and the management, or whatever or whatever you want to say, the government, whatever. They're playing chicken, aren't they? And I think in this case, they're just going to crash into each other. And it looks like it's just going to be, as is often the case with our hopeless species, even though you can see something coming from a mile away, it has to there has to be the crash. Otherwise, it won't be fixed. So it looks like they're just going to burn it down, aren't they? And then start again afterwards.
I think that the bad thing in this is for Canadian taxpayers is that they believe that they can just reach into your pocket, my pocket, and Canadians' pockets to continue funding this thing that doesn't really have a real business case anymore.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I think it's reasonable to subsidize mail delivery to places where, like, that's the biggest defense, isn't it? Canada Post, they subsidize mail delivery to like really hard to reach places, rural places, and all that. Like, that's great. I think most people are okay with that. But what's really killing the company is that they refuse to adapt in other areas, and they refuse to go in on the package delivery and all the rest of it. That can't be subsidized, can it? Because at that point, you're just subsidizing the workforce so that they can have much better sort of employment conditions compared to UPS and all the rest of them, FedEx. That's not really fair, is it? I mean, and we have a similar arrangement with lots of government jobs, don't we? Where they get so much more money than their private sector colleagues, let's say, who are equivalents. They get more vacation time, better pensions, all the rest of it. But we pay for it all, and so does the sort of guy that works for the private company doing the same job. I mean, that's obviously not fair, and it's unreasonable, isn't it? And it's often obtained through unions who threaten the government. So obviously that can't continue.
And this is another one from Blacklock's. Harold Jonker, a municipal councillor, was one of the first to join the 2022 Freedom Convoy and was arrested there and was acquitted of all charges. So there you go.
It took a while, didn't it?
Took a while, yeah. The judge saw through the Crown's weak case and had the courage to do the right thing, Jonker's lawyer said, right, in a statement on the acquittal of mischief and intimidation charges. There you go, a councillor. And he's a church elder, father of 13. This guy's busy. A township of West Lincoln, Ontario, where he attended a peaceful demonstration as manager of a trucking firm. 13 kids. Not many people have 13 kids anymore. Tough to afford.
You'd want to pop another one out, wouldn't you? Just for good
just
luck.
To get past
you
that number.
13. But I would say, like, I mean, this is a very big topic, and we don't really have time to go into it. But so he had a trucking business. Well, of course he was upset. We all seem to forget, don't we? The truckers were, back then, they thought that they were finished. They thought that their livelihoods had completely gone, and they were desperate. But for some reason, we forget that. Like, he had every reason to demonstrate. He had every reason to be, or anybody associated with the trucking industry had every reason to be upset then. And it was also a ridiculous regulation anyway, wasn't it? It was a completely stupid, pointless thing, like so much else during COVID. Just performative, to use that word that I despise.
The township,
but will that empathy, basic empathy or understanding, ever be on display from the people that want to prosecute the likes of this chap? I don't think so.
The township of West Lincoln also piled on and gave him a $1,700 fine for breaching code of conduct. Why not, eh?
Just wrote in there. Yeah, so he's terrified for his income and his livelihood. Might as well fine him as well. That's good.
Yeah, so there you go. Well, he was acquitted. I'm sure he got a lot of, I'm sure, negativity from his fellow council members there who wanted to pile on during that time.
It's a very
Uh,
empowering time for that sort of personality, wasn't it?
yeah, no, yeah, vigilantes and deputized. Everybody got deputized. Turn in your neighbors. Do everything you can. We did lots of stories on the truckers, and we got a lot of hate mail for it. So because we did stories on truckers from the Okanagan that traveled there, and we were called quite a few names on it.
And that was
There you go.
in large part because of Justin Trudeau's misinformation. Well, disinformation, I suppose you would say, where he tried to associate everybody involved in that trucking rally with racism and sexism and Nazism and all sorts of other
Yeah,
isms.
every is that there is, like he definitely threw it all out there, and he refused to
Yeah,
talk to them.
he quite literally endangered their lives and certainly destroyed their reputations.
We had
But
reporters
there you
from
are.
mainstream media actually doing the jobs of the government, actually going up there and getting the VIN numbers out of the trucks, doing the research, and finding out who these companies are, and then basically doxing them.
Yeah, they also doxed them when they hacked into the Give, Send, Go or whatever it was, the fundraiser, and they got all the numbers and addresses and names of people that donated. And the media started to, I don't know if you can remember this, one of the most disgraceful episodes in the history of journalism, as far as I'm aware. They started to publish stories saying, like, Brian Jones, who's a physiotherapist in Peterborough, Ontario, or something, like he gave
Donated
this money.
money.
It's like absolutely psychotic, like sociopathic
It's,
levels of
isn't the
misbehavior.
media's role supposed to be to hold power accountable instead of actually enforcing the power that's bestowed upon the government, like acting as their enforcer?
Well, it's kind of the clue, isn't it, as to how the media, the Canadian media, and the media class perceives itself. They see themselves as the enforcer, the protector of the island of liberalism in Ottawa and Toronto and Vancouver, or these little islands that kind of they're just hanging on in a sea of rednecks, or however they would describe those people. That's how they see themselves, and they're kind of like they're like these they are like the foot soldiers of liberalism, aren't they? And they protect all the special groups that they obsess about, LGBT and whatever else, immigrants. Well, not immigrants like me, obviously. You have to be a good immigrant, not a bad one.
Well, good news. Canada is now producing navel oranges, according to Loblaws anyway. If you look at the, the sticker there on there, product of Canada. I didn't know we grew navel oranges. Did you?
This is really funny though, isn't it? Because he's saying once it was pointed out, they got rid of it and then took $1 off the price. It's hilarious.
Absolutely.
But that's, like how gullible does what is this, Loblaws or Superstore? Yeah.
Loblaws, yeah. Well, that is Superstore.
Yeah. How gullible do they think that the Canadian public actually is? That if you just put a maple leaf on it, even if it's an orange, and say, look at this Canadian orange, that people will pay $1 more for it because it's got the maple leaf and it's like elbows up or something along those lines. Like that's the kind of contempt that these stores seem to have, or at least this one store.
Is it elbows up or pants down? I'm not sure where this is going. Like, yeah, they're charging more. Labeling a product that if you just had a little bit of common sense, you'd say, navel oranges grown in Canada? Like, okay. Show me where they are growing them. Show me where they're growing them. On somebody's patio?
We should grow oranges in Canada. Use some of that nice cheap energy to build greenhouses. I've
tried a few times to grow oranges and like limes and that, and I always forget to bring them in from the patio and that. They do get fairly tiny though. So it was, when you go to places like Arizona and that, and you just walk outside of your hotel room and like some of the areas there, and there's like grapefruits and you can eat right off the tree. It's kind of cool, right?
Yeah, Florida as well, famous for that.
Trump did a big announcement yesterday on the Golden Dome, and it says Canada can be a part of the Golden Dome. I don't think they have much choice to make us part of that Golden Dome. But yeah, so he says that Canada wants to be a part of it. I mean, I would think that they would, just like all the defense stuff, they protect us in their best interests.
Totally, and he's obviously tried to swing it as being like, oh, we'll protect Canada like we always do. We'll help them out. And he's also said that Canada's going to have to pay for it. I mean, you're right, though. Why would the Americans, just think about it from a strategic angle, why would the Americans protect the lower 48 states and then Alaska and just leave this massive chunk just there on like to the north and east
Knowing
of
what
them?
I
Why would they do that? Obviously, they want to include Canada. And this is funny from Canada's perspective. This is almost like something, which is also the case with NORAD, where we could almost say, like, what are you going to give us? We'll let you do this. We'll let you use our airspace. What are you going to give us in exchange for letting you have strategic control of, our skies, effectively? But instead, Trump, the master manipulator, he reframes it, doesn't he? He completely flips it, and he makes it a gift from the US.
I think what we should give them is in exchange for the protection of the Golden Dome, which I believe we should want, is we should give them Francois Philippe Champagne, Melanie Jolie, and Justin Trudeau. That'd be a good trade.
Where would they fit in the American political landscape? Maybe they would be obscure California sort of mayors or something like that.
Well, they could go to a lot of those ICE detention facilities and stand there.
With a white dress on, crying.
The South African president visiting the White House as tensions with the U.S. as tensions rise. South African president is due to meet with Donald Trump in the White House today. And that's over the South African.
He's arrived now.
Yeah, there you go.
But it's very, yep, they're doing it now. They're doing the press conference now, which could be hilarious. But yeah, obviously it's a poisoned relationship for many reasons. But the South Africans have, Trump talks all the time, doesn't he, about non-tariff barriers. The South Africans, in a way, have like some of the most intricate non-tariff barriers in the world. They have a very abstract system of ownership, and you've heard Elon Musk complain about that. It's all, as with most revolutionary countries, revolutionary societies, it's all based it's all justified based on the revolution, which in the case of South Africa was getting rid of white rule and replacing it with black rule. Or ANC rule. So they have lots of ways of justifying it, but it's not going to, Donald Trump doesn't like that. And then on top of that, they accused Israel of genocide. They've been very, very anti-Israel for many years now, the South Africans. And obviously the Americans don't like that because they're good friends with Israel. And then there's the unpleasant treatment of white people in South Africa, which is, at least in terms of the government, the federal South African government, it's undeniable that they're not very nice to white people. It's built into the law. Just listen to their speeches. Listen to the speeches of senior ANC figures and EFF figures. They're not very nice about white people. But for some reason, that's being portrayed as though it's like a conspiracy. And Trump and also Marco Rubio have said, we're not going to put up with that. We're not going to do business with you if you're going to be hostile to a racial minority. But it is, to be fair, it isn't just whites. They're also very hostile to Zimbabweans and other sort of African, sort of sub-Saharan African immigrants who come down to South Africa. They're not very nice to them either. But we'll see. We'll see what they discuss.
Yeah, Jake Tapper on that tour promoting his book ended up on the Megyn Kelly show, and she was not very kind to him. We're going to play this clip here from Megyn Kelly and Jake Tapper and Alex. I always forget his last name. The co-writer of the book that Jake Tapper is out there, The Original Sin.
I know now, obviously, I feel tremendous humility about my coverage, that Laura Trump interview, for example, et cetera. She saw something that I did not see at the time, 100%. And I own that. I did ask Joe Biden to be transparent about his health records in an interview in 2020. I did ask him about the fact that voters
but then he wasn't.
Thought that he was not transparent at all. No.
He promised you that he would be transparent about his health records, and then he wasn't. And when you sat with him again,
at all,
including 1 month after the Jackie Walorski thing, you didn't ask him about it. You didn't follow up on the fact that he was falling up the stairs, that he was losing his train of thought regularly, that he was slurring, that he was incomprehensible, that he was getting lost on the White House lawn. You sat right across from him and you asked none of that, notwithstanding the fact that he had promised you he would be fully transparent about his health issues.
That's true, But I did ask him about his age and the fact that the American people had concluded that even though he said whenever anybody brought up the subject of his age, watch me. And I said,
yes,
they're watching you and they are concerned that you were too old for this job.
But you know as well as I do that there's a way of, you can say, hey, there's this poll on your age, or you could say, you just forgot that Jackie Walorski was dead. You asked where she was moments after watching a videotape tribute to her. You lowered the flags at the White House after she died. This happened 13 days before you sat with him. There is a way of pressing a man like that on the actual infirmities to bring it home to him and to the audience, and you didn't do it.
That's correct. I didn't. And like I said, I feel humility about my coverage. I mean, it's not like I was asking him his favorite movie or his favorite color. We were talking about Putin. We were talking about other issues of national importance. But yeah, I mean, of course, I've said I look back at my coverage with humility, and I wish I did cover the issues of age and acuity, but I wish I had covered them much more. And I wish, I mean, of course, it's May 2025. Do I wish that in that 10, 15-minute interview I had with Biden in October 2022, that this had been the only subject? Because I had then
well, it wasn't
what I know
just that,
now.
though, Jake. It wasn't just that. I mean, you sat with him a couple of times in the course of his presidency, and these issues were not pressed. Well, there was at least that time, and then there was the time at the the And but separate and apart from that, you covered the Biden's presidency. No. Let me just finish my point. You covered the Biden presidency
with him during his. I had one interview with him
and it was
during his
13 days
presidency.
after the Jackie Walorski thing. But you covered the Biden presidency aggressively throughout the 4 years, and you didn't cover mental acuity hardly at all. I mean, time and time again, when issues came up, you seemed to be running cover for the president.
I don't
you didn't seem
think
interested.
that's true.
Well, I mean, we'll start with the Laura Trump issue that you referred. Here it is. This happened in 2020.
Joe Biden, as we all know, has worked to overcome.
That's fine for now. You got to go watch that full interview. I watched that full interview with Megyn Kelly, and Jake Tapper definitely backpedaling a lot. And so, I mean, he did admit that with humility, he wished he would have done better coverage, but he's not taking any responsibility for it, for sure.
No, it's not good enough. If he thinks that he can find an escape route from mainstream media, particularly that CNN brand that he exemplifies, then he's going to have to do more of a mea culpa than that. He's going to have to do a bit more like what's his name did, the brother of Cuomo's brother. I never remember his name, but he did more of a convincing sort of like, sorry guys, yeah, made a mistake. But yeah, Megyn Kelly there, relentless, wasn't she? She's a real tapper slapper.
Yeah, no, she went after him pretty good, and well deserved too, Jake Tapper. We're going to play a little clip later on here in our comedy section there with Bill Maher that goes after Jake Tapper as well. Sadly,
but it's funny. He's kind of just thrown himself. He's thrown himself to the wolves, isn't he? And he's like, well, I tried. It's like, you're gonna have to do a bit more than that, mate.
All in the name of selling a book, right? Hey, cash money. It's all about the cash money.
Yeah.
Hey.
I guess so, and I guess that's also true 3 years ago or whatever, when he was indeed running cover for the Biden administration, which had as its figurehead a man that was quite clearly a vulnerable old person that didn't even know how to get off a stage. I mean, it was obvious that he was a bit at sea, That sort of conspiracy. There's only one way to describe that, and it is a conspiracy. That was a conspiracy of silence or a cover-up from the likes of CNN to refuse to discuss the fact that the most powerful country in the world had like a doddering geriatric as its leader. Very, very strange.
Just there's somebody in our comments here that is trying to dominate all the comments and telling Canadians here that it's never been greater. Like basically trolling and trying to pick fights and stuff like that. And just, I guess everybody's just having a vibe session. Like there's no problems in Canada, according to CW888. Why not put your real name down there, CW888, instead of just spewing all this nonsense? How about that, eh?
That's a very lucky number in China, that.
Isn't it? There you go.
888. We like that.
888. Some BC and local news here. The Kelowna RCMP, the city is looking at maybe considering getting a municipal police force. And we're going to play a clip here from our own Kent Mulgat that went out there and talked to the Kelowna about the Kelowna RCMP. Let's play that clip.
The city of Kelowna is taking a look at the possibility of ending the long relationship it's had with the RCMP providing police services in the city. But as they engage with a consultant on the topic, they're being careful to point out that this isn't out of any dissatisfaction with the level of service they've been able to get with the RCMP.
No. This is an exploratory review so that we can understand and assess two different models of police service delivery. One is contract policing, and the other is a municipal police service delivery model. And I think it's really important as we get into this process to understand this is about good governance. This is about us being prudent and proactive in our planning. We are a rapidly growing city, and we need to ensure that we have the right policing model that meets our needs and the community interests now and into the future.
This process could open the door to saying goodbye to a long relationship with the RCMP. It does sort of open up that possibility.
It does open up the possibility, and again, I can't emphasize enough, at this juncture, it is an exploratory review to really educate ourselves and also to prepare ourselves for the possibility that the federal government does not enable the RCMP to be a viable contracting agency after 2032. We are in a 20-year agreement for contract policing in this country, and that expires in 2032. And there is uncertainty as to whether or not the RCMP will continue to offer contract policing services. And so we as a city, from a good governance perspective, we need to be proactive and we need to be prepared should that scenario play out with the federal government.
Okay, so I guess what people shouldn't be taking from this is the suggestion that this is all brought about because of some dissatisfaction or problems with how it works with the RCMP.
Yeah, on the contrary. In fact, we have great confidence in all of the uniformed members within the RCMP detachment, as well as the many municipal non-uniformed staff who work behind the scenes in our detachments. The work that those people do is absolutely vital to our community. It's incredibly difficult and complex work, and we have complete confidence in them throughout this review.
Right now,
There you go. They're exploring, taking a look at that. Municipal police force is hard to set up, though, too, unless they join with other, like, Abbotsford or something like that, or Vancouver police. It's very hard to set it up. You got to set up training centers and everything. It's lots of expense in setting up your own police force, other than, the RCMP is expensive for sure.
I mean, what would happen to all the Mounties as well? Because the Kelowna detachment is now the biggest one in Canada, I believe.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of Mounties, like 300 and something.
So when a municipality starts its own police force, the RCMP don't leave altogether. Like, they still have presences in Edmonton and Calgary and Vancouver and stuff like that. They just are more on the bigger crimes and stuff like that, as opposed to like traffic enforcement and that kind of stuff, right? So.
Right, which is what our boy Justin wants to happen anyway, isn't it? He wants the RCMP to get away from that sort of stuff.
Yeah, so I mean, it just moves the RCMP up into the next level of crime. I mean, obviously they wouldn't have as many people around, so they would be handling more like felonies and stuff like that, as opposed to, I don't know all the details of it, but like a lot of the police forces, there is RCMP in all the areas where there is municipal police forces.
Right.
There you go. David Eby terminates that downtown east side consultants contracts that came under fire. He got a lot of heat for that. He's terminated that contract to improve conditions in the Vancouver's downtown east side, because obviously there was a bit of a, a lot of critics were attacking that, and it called it political favor and lacked transparency.
Yeah, nice wee scandal for our boy David there. along
Yeah, shelled
with the rest
out
of
a
his
few
scandals that
dollars,
he's got to
right?
figure out?
Yeah, shelled out a few dollars to this guy too, and the guy was basically taking phone calls.
Well, well, the worst thing. This is a point made by the BC Conservatives, but I think it's also valid. It's not just a political point. The worst thing is that there was no measurement of success.
No.
I mean, jobs like that where you're shelling out a lot of money, you've got to have some kind of way of judging if they're successful or not, haven't you? You can't just give them completely sort of free rein to do what they want.
Yeah, and it was a consulting company owned by Bryant, a former CEO of Legal Aid of BC. And in the news briefing, EB said Bryant would receive no severance, and he had been paid up to Sunday an amount in the neighborhood of about $75,000, right? So, but this contract was for $325,000, including $25,000 in expenses.
It's a pretty penny, isn't it? Especially when you're being given that by a completely broke province. It just, can't figure out its finances and hasn't been able to for quite a number of years.
There's a group pushing here in West Kelowna there to get the city of West Kelowna to utilize solar power. They want a big solar array out there. I've got solar on my roof. It's the Glen Rosa Residents Association will be appearing for West Kelowna to urge them to leverage solar power for the city. I've always said that maybe if you take away some of the forest, that is in the area around the homes there, and turn that into solar panels, it might be a good use, and that protect homes from fire too, wildfire, in the interface areas.
It's not a bad idea.
And that side of the mountain there,
they've done it in Summerland, haven't they? They've gone all in appropriately. They've gone all in on solar panels in a place called Summerland. That makes sense.
And that side of the lake there, with the west on the west side there, definitely would be in a great place for the sun's rays, like that side of the, like that facing the way the hill's up like that on that side too. Great place for solar panels.
Yeah, and they say West Kelowna is well positioned to become a solar energy powerhouse. I bet you Gilbo would absolutely love that.
Yeah, well, I pitched it as well, and I said, you could take that interface area where we lost a bunch of homes in that fire a couple of years ago now, and if you just did that hillside there, it would, one, protect homes from wildfire, and also generate a ton of electricity. Makes sense on that side for sure.